I think being one of the first female students coming to Jesus College, I think there must have been like looks. I think you'd be very, very conscious of the fact that you are a female student. You aren't just a student, you are specifically a female student.
I just cannot imagine how difficult that would have been, because there would have been people staring at them as they studied, and there would have been people who doubted their legitimacy of being in college.
I imagine they were feeling a lot of things. Excitement, fear, nervousness, worry. It's a lot, I think, to be that first cohort, but it's also a huge step, not just for yourself, but it does kind of feel like a huge step for all of women. I'd like to imagine that they would have been quite excited to be part of that first cohort and that first kind of wave of a revolution, essentially.
I'm sure we women felt like every new undergraduate arriving at Oxford. Anxious, excited, hoping that we would make friends, hoping that we could do the work, hoping that we liked our tutor, hoping that we'd fit in. But we were very conspicuous as only 25 girls amongst, I suppose, 275 men. The week before I was due to come, I said to my mother, actually, I've changed my mind, I don't think I'm going. And I'm first of 5 children. My mother was a very calm person, and she didn't argue with me, but she took me out and bought me some new clothes. And I can remember putting on, those who know me might remember this, a green corduroy jacket, green corduroy skirt, and thinking, actually, I look quite grown up in this. Maybe I'll be okay. So we never had a discussion about it, but somehow I arrived, crossed that threshold in my green jacket and a skirt, and was all right.
Oxford as a place has changed quite a lot over 50 years, but it's kept a lot of traditions. I mean, looking at pictures of these first girls in their sub-flask, that's exactly what our photo looked like. I mean, I really wonder what is in the Jesus archives in terms of what we can find about that first group of women who were here 50 years ago and all the women that have come since. There's got to be some stuff in there.
This is kind of the end of the last chapter. Oh, wow. This is the JCR photograph taken in June 1974, and it's the last photo when Jesus was all men.
Okay.
So it's kind of the end of the old world. And then, of course, in October 1974, it's the start of our new world, because this is the freshest photograph from 50 years ago, and it's the first photograph showing a mixed college. 1974, as those of us who were around at the time will tell you, was an age of very big hair for the men. And it's something of a joke. I can show this to people and say, okay, who are the boys and who are the girls? And sometimes you've got to use the fact that in those days, the men always wear a white tie and the girls always wore a black ribbon. And sometimes that's the only way you can work out who is a boy and who is a girl.
This is an article written about 1974 and the girls coming. You may notice that there are 26 photos and there are only 25 girls. This gentleman is Stephen Hill. And because he had long hair and he was wearing a flowery shirt, for some reason he got put in with the girls. They had to identify the women with a big red W. Some women don't have a W. I don't, for instance. And yet Stephen Hill does. There he is. So the system was not working, was it? Stephen Hill got a lot of stick for that, in a friendly sort of way.
So there weren't many of them?
No, I have the impression that numbers in the early years were kept quite low.
Okay.
I think there was still a sense of feeling of, gosh, this is all a bit sort of new.
I remember very well getting my telegram, which it was in those days, telling me that I had a place at Jesus College. And I imagine, like everyone else, it was a mixture of delight and not really believing it.
The moment that the telegram arrived, place awarded, Jesus College, Oxford, of course I was over the moon.
And telegrams were charged by the word, so you wanted to make them as economic as possible. So I sent my parents a telegram saying, Jesus wants me. And they sent me a telegram back saying, hallelujah. So, and that kind of summed it up.
We didn't, on the whole, tend to stick together, because actually that would have been against the spirit of what the Jesus plan was about. It was about integrating rather than having a little clump of women all together as a little group in the college. So I'd say I was gender blind in a way as to whom I made friends with. It was people I liked.
This was a pilot project. 5 colleges went mixed for 5 years. Now, part of that, I think, was to protect the women's colleges, but part of it was, you know, not the university, I think, not quite trusting it would work. So, and we were aware that it's only 5 colleges. The number of women in the university has not increased that much. It's increased by 100.
I just loved the independence, really, especially financial independence of that first time, because as a daughter of the clergy, I found I was entitled to a small grant. It was £60 a year, I think, which seemed incredible wealth at the time. And general independence, being able to be in my room, my own room, work when I wanted to.
On the one hand, it was really special, and the other hand, it was really normal. And that sounds a little bit crazy, but I think it's because all of us, certainly in the year, so all 100 of us in the year, the guys and the 25 women, wanted to make it work.
There was a sense in which it felt a little bit like you were in a goldfish bowl. There was an awful lot of observation of what people were doing, who they were talking to, where they were, going on the whole time, especially in that first year.
It did take us until 3rd week to go into the JCR, because the JCR was full of young men hiding behind their newspaper or looking a little bit too hard. You know, it was quite difficult. We were quite young.
You were obviously going to be noticed. Now that was a blessing and a curse, actually, because people would always smile and say hello. Sometimes you think, wish they didn't, but you know, you could get unwanted attention, but you also felt included.
Here at Jesus, it was clearly decided that the women's rooms would be allocated around the college, not just in one place, whereas in some of the other colleges that went co-ed in 1974, they would have 1 or 2 women's staircases. And that resulted in certain parts of the college being eyeballed by everybody. Oh, who's going in there then? Who are they going to see? One has to be a little bit guarded about saying everything is progress and nobody suffered. I think there were problems, and I think that probably the women's colleges suffered badly.
Some of my older male undergraduate friends told me that the Dons had been pretty concerned when they decided to admit us, when they suddenly realised that this would mean they had to introduce soft toilet paper and mirrors in every room.
It always amused me that all our bedrooms were given mirrors, which we didn't realise weren't in the men's rooms, full-length mirrors. And I remember my friends go, oh, and I'm looking at themselves. It was really very funny. They loved the mirrors.
It was difficult for us to come as a small minority of girls, but sometimes I think we forget it must have been difficult for the tutors, for the staff, for the porters. This was all new for them as well, and a bit weird.
There was a rumour that flew round that maybe one of the things that might go wrong would be that one of the women students would get pregnant. 1974 was the point at which contraceptive pill was becoming available widely, And I think it's probably true to say that many of us who arrived in 1974 as part of what we did would be to make sure that we, if we wished to, were able to get supplies of the contraceptive pill, because we were aware that we were coming into a lifestyle whereby there would be a certain amount of expectation of sexual freedom around us, and what we didn't want to do was have our studies overshadowed by worries about unwanted pregnancies.
After 3 years, we'd sort of normalised the idea that you could have women in college and it was all okay. And I remember one thing, that the guys were always hungry, just always. They complained endlessly about there not being enough food. And then they discovered that there was an advantage to sit next to one of the women, because you would be served the meat or fish or whatever, and the vegetables we put down the table. And they reckoned if they sat next to a woman, she would take a smaller portion, so there'd be more for them. And they also found they would get us, I remember a number of times being asked to ask the scouts for more veg. And they were a bit grumpy about giving it to the men, but if we asked for it, they were more likely to turn up and plonk down on the table another load of potatoes or veg or something, and then they'd all dive in and eat it. I always found that quite amusing. But I can understand, they were, they're teenagers doing a huge amount of sport. No wonder they were hungry and working hard. So, yes.
I really do think it's important that we acknowledge the guys' part in all of this, because they could have made it hell for us. And I think, from what I have heard, that in at least one of the other colleges that went mixed at the same time, they did. So the guys made it easy for us. They were supportive, they were friendly. If you went to a party and somebody was being a pain, you could grab one of the guys and say, just this guy's being difficult, just help me out here.
I don't think many of us felt harassed or worried about the men we were living with cheek by jowl, and that in itself is a bit of a success story, isn't it? One of the things that I was really struck by was, and really hoping would happen, was that in the teaching we were treated just like the men. Certainly my tutors didn't go more softly or didn't give us any leeway. We were there as students, and a student was a student. The gendered was just not material. I felt very strongly that's exactly how it should have been. We all hoped we were there on merit.
I don't know who suggested it, I really can't remember. But it was sometime during that first Michaelmas term that I think probably some of the third years who played rugby decided they were going to challenge the first year women to a rugby match, which of course was a bit of a joke, because they were all serious rugby players and 15 stone plus and whatever. But the catch was, the proviso was, that they were not allowed to run.
In theory, the women were allowed to run and the men were not. And in theory, it was touch tackle. And in theory, there were 15 players on both sides. What happened was that it stopped being touch tackle. There was, and at a certain point, the porter, the head porter who was acting as ref, joined in on the women's side. But we had Frances, who was I think she'd been a school's cross-country champion, who was on the wing and was absolutely sprinting along with the ball. So the rules were flexible.
The whole point was, it was about having fun. And it actually proved to be, I think, one of those pivotal moments when the college came together and we took a step forward into becoming a community.
I think many of us, and I certainly did feel this, that I'd been given the privilege of being one of the first girls to have a place at a men's college to study. I didn't want to let the sisterhood down, I didn't want them, especially because informally it was known as the Jesus experiment. And certainly later on, I found out that other colleges had said to people in Jesus, you'll be sorry, this won't work. So we did have a burden of responsibility as well. And I suppose there was, on a personal level, on a selfish level maybe, you know, you wanted to do well, you wanted to make friends, you wanted to have fun. But I think there was also that feeling that we'd been given a chance to prove our mettle and we didn't want to mess it up.
We set a tone of getting involved. We probably academically, as the group of women, probably weren't quite as successful as the next year that came in. But I think some of that might have been to do with being pioneers and this sense of being pioneers.
Well, I'm very glad the experiment, the Jesus experiment as it was called, was a success, of course. And I hope that the new people coming up today are just able to enjoy the college on the same terms as the men, perhaps without the unduly optimistic expectations of them that we might have had, but with the same sense of challenge and stimulation and support that we enjoyed 50 years ago.
They 100% paved the way for us. I think we wouldn't be here without them. The people before us wouldn't be here without them. The people after us won't be here without them. They came and essentially carved out a space for themselves in an institution where there originally was no space. I don't think you can overstate how incredible their impact was just by being here. But there are still quite a few challenges. We've got a long way to go in many ways, specifically in those more male-dominated subjects.
In academic positions, there are still quite a lot of men than women, especially in science fields, especially in engineering. It is getting better, but there is still a tendency to, for example, if group leaders are women, the principal investigators would be men.
A lot of subjects, especially those which are male-dominated, they tend to emphasise the achievements of female students by stating that they are a female student, rather than saying this is an incredible piece of work done by a student at Jesus. This is an incredible piece of work done by a female student. They are the first woman to do something.
I hope women in 50 years' time, there's not even a door that they have to push through or knock on or anything. I hope they can just walk straight through, because I do think that's probably still the difference, is we still apply and we still ask and we still feel like there needs to be a level of approaching, whereas some of the boys just walk straight through. And I would love for girls in 50 years' time not to have to ask and not to have to feel that they need to apply, but just kind of walk on through with the same confidence, really just feeling like, yeah, I'm meant to be there and everyone knows that.
One of the things that I really love hearing is when people say, what do you mean there were just men only? When was that? As if that was possibly the Tudor period. I think the fact that it feels normal for men and women to be studying together in Jesus College is a great legacy to have. It says a lot for Jesus College, as well as perhaps for us, that it was a successful experiment, and I'm very, very proud of it.